A major legal fight over Texas' new congressional maps.
You can draw districts based on political performance.
But did it stop there in the drawing of new congressional boundaries?
We will see you back in court very soon.
We're in El Paso, where federal judges will soon make a ruling that will impact your vote.
We're going to do everything we can to move the needle in this state.
And backlash over big changes within the Texas Democratic Party.
We will take on whatever billionaire, whatever banker, whatever bootlicking bastard we have to make sure that the little guy gets his fair seat at the table.
This is Lone Star Politics from NBC5 and the Dallas Morning News.
Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Vince Sims from NBC5, sitting in for Phil Prazen. Gromer Jeffers, political writer with the Dallas Morning News, is on assignment and will join us shortly. We're going to begin in El Paso and a hearing that could have a major impact on your 2026 election vote. The hearing is over the new congressional boundaries signed into law in August by Governor Abbott. The same maps that resulted in Texas Democrats breaking quorum during the legislative session and ignited a national debate. A panel of 3 federal judges must decide the legality of the maps intended to add 5 additional Republican seats from Texas to the GOP's narrow House majority. The argument is that the GOP-drawn map is unconstitutional for several reasons. Gromer Jeffers, political writer for the Dallas Morning News and co-host of this broadcast, is covering the hearing, and he joins us now. Good morning, Gromer.
Vince, how are you?
Doing well. Missing you here in the studio. Let's jump right into this. I got to ask you, how has this trial played out so far?
Well, as expected, the plaintiffs, those who believe the maps are unconstitutional, put on their case. They brought several witnesses, including State Senator Royce West, to testify that they believe the maps were unconstitutional. And those witnesses were cross-examined by the state, lawyers for the Attorney General's office. And I got to tell you, Vince, what's at stake here is whether the maps were drawn with a partisan political intent or were they drawn with an intentional intent to racial gerrymander. And that's the distinction. Now, what's interesting is both can be true, right? But the way the voting rights laws have evolved in terms of the interpretation, the state believes that if they can argue that this is just a political process, that President Donald Trump wanted 5 more Republican congressional seats from Texas, then they believe they'll win this case. But it's a long way to go, and we'll see.
I know we're just getting into it, but what has stood out so far with you with the plaintiff's case?
Well, they're pinning it on a letter from the Justice Department that says that several coalition districts, so-called coalition districts in Texas are illegal. That included District 33, that's represented by Congressman Mark Vesey. That district was drawn in 2011. Mark Vesey began to serve in 2013. It's a district that's controlled by Democrats, but a coalition of Democrats, Black, Hispanic, and also white. Well, the plaintiffs are saying that the letter from the Justice Department and Governor Greg Abbott's embrace of that letter proves that they had racial intent in drawing the maps. Will the judges agree with that? I don't know, but it's interesting that the plaintiffs are now arguing about the Justice Department letter when Democrats at the beginning of the process were pointing out that Trump wanted these seats and that it was political. And so you're seeing all these arguments sort of shift and change. But the bottom line is, was there racial intent in drawing these congressional districts?
Mm-hmm. So what are you expecting to see when the defense calls its witnesses this week?
Yeah, the state's going to call its witnesses. They're going to try to prove that as objectionable as you think these maps are, we drew them because we could draw them and because we wanted to maximize Republican representation in Congress, that we drew these maps for political gain. and there was no racial intent. That's what they will argue. And of course, the plaintiffs will have a chance to cross-examine. And again, they will try to prove that, look, why were only minority districts targeted in this process? Questions like that. And so that's what you're going to have to, that's the question that will be answered. Politics versus racial gerrymandering.
You know, as we talk about the politics coming into play with this, we know the federal judges are presidential appointees. You know, can you talk about the judges and if this could have any type of impact?
Yeah, it's a 3-judge panel. One judge, Judge Smith, was appointed all the way back in the Reagan era by Ronald Reagan. You know, there's an Obama-appointed judge and a Trump-appointed judge, and they're from different parts of the state. This is known as a conservative panel. They're veterans of voting rights and redistricting issue. The May-June redistricting case on the 2021 congressional boundaries and legislative boundaries was in their court, in the federal court here in El Paso. So they're veterans of this process, but no matter how they rule, this will end up in the Supreme Court. It's a constitutional question. That means an automatic appeal to the loser to the U.S. Supreme Court. And so we're going to see potentially a historic ruling by the Supreme Court, because this is a very important case that will tell us how the Voting Rights Act and various sections under the Voting Rights Act are viewed in the modern era, 2025.
All right, Gromer, we have to leave it right there. Thank you so much for joining us from El Paso.
Good to see you, Vince.
Well, a move within the Texas Democratic Party is raising concerns. It's opening offices in Amarillo, Eagle Pass, Dallas, and Houston. There has been some pushback with reports of upheaval within the party. I sat down with party chair Kendall Scudder, who said the expansion will help revive the party excitement and help in the effort to end a drought. Texas Democrats haven't won a statewide race in more than 30 years. Here's part of our conversation.
I think that grassroots all across Texas are sick and tired of our office and the Texas Democratic Party being insulated inside of Austin. It's time for us to get around, do a 254 county strategy, and get serious about winning this state again. I don't think that the party's necessarily done that. They've always had a consultancy strategy. Well, if you ask those consultants, they'll just tell you every single time that they just didn't get enough money to be able to win it. I think that we have to build a grassroots army in every corner of this state, and that's exactly what we're doing.
You did get some pushback from it, and even some people that resigned or quit over this?
Any time that you have change, it's going to be a little hard. But I don't think that there's anybody that is a Democrat sitting at home thinking, well, I wish the Democrats would just stay the course. Every single one of them are saying the Democrats need to rethink the way they're operating. And I knew when I got elected that there were going to be some big, bold moves we were going to make that was going to upset the political class. That's fine. I don't work for them. I work for the grassroots of this party, and we're going to do everything we can to move the needle in this state because it's our obligation to meet this moment. And I think that grassroots Democrats across the country are starving for a Democratic Party that understands the gravity of what we're facing, and that's what we're going to act like what we are doing is consequential. And I don't feel like Democrats have been operating that way in the past.
So you're going grassroots, you're moving some offices around the state, so obviously think there's some races that can be won out there?
Look, I'm not an idiot, okay? I know that there's not a whole lot that we have in opportunities out in the Panhandle this cycle, okay? That has never been a place that's been very good for Democrats. But the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The next best time's today. If we're going to be serious about talking about being a party that stands up for working class people, we have to be organizing where working class people are. And I grew up on a Purple Hole pea farm in East Texas. We were all Democrats because the Democrats delivered big, systemic, progressive change that made life better for us. That's what we as a party have to be focused on. I think a lot of people in the Panhandle are looking for people that are going to stand up and fight for them. The Democratic Party of today, we will take on whatever billionaire, whatever banker, whatever bootlicking bastard we have to make sure that the little guy gets his fair seat at the table. That's what opening up offices in places like Amarillo and Eagle Pass are about.
So what are some of the statewide races you're thinking and looking at that it can be winnable?
Well, I mean, Of course, as chairman of the Texas Democratic Party, I'll tell you all of them, right? But I do think there are some unique opportunities for us. Look at the U.S. Senate race and the amount of attention that that's garnering right now. Whether it's John Cornyn or Ken Paxton on the other side, they've never gotten out of bed a single day and thought about you. They get out of bed every single day and think about themselves and Donald Trump. End of the list. I think the United States Senate is a real possibility here in Texas, particularly when we have a rigged economy that is only working for the people at the top that are now controlling the government, and the rest of us are stuck at the bottom groveling for crumbs. This is a good opportunity for us. Look at the governor's mansion. The governor picked up the phone and bent over backwards for a president that asked him to shut down community public schools. He pushed a voucher program that will defund community public schools, will make sure teachers are having to go out of pocket even more to buy supplies for their classrooms, and that's going to end up crippling arts and sports programs that we're known for here in Texas. I think this governor is vulnerable because he's picking on our community public schools that are pillars of our community. Keep going down the list. I mean, I think we have a lot of opportunity in front of us. We have a lot of county judge options. We have a lot of county commissioner spots. From the bottom of the ticket all the way up to the top, the Democrats are here to fight, and we're not just going to roll over and do business as usual.
What do you see as your biggest challenges you're faced with right now?
I think the biggest challenge that we face in Texas is that for 30 years we've gotten kicked in the teeth. And for 30 years, we have been relegated to the sidelines. And it's created this mentality amongst Democrats that it's a lost cause. But this change doesn't happen overnight. We have to build on it year over year, cycle over cycle. And so making sure that people understand that, yeah, we may not wake up on election day and clean plate and win every single one of those seats, but I think we'll make progress. And I think that the Republicans know that if we stick at it and keep slogging away, building a working class grassroots army all across this state, they're in a whole lot of trouble. And so to me, that is one of the biggest challenges, reminding people who we are as Democrats. Democrats built Texas. Democrats have the opportunity to save it too.
As you said, it's a challenge that's been 30 years in the making to get to this point, so it's not going to be an easy way to just turn the ship quickly to make this happen.
Of course not. And as a party, we also have to look in the mirror and own up to mistakes that we've made in the past. One of those examples, there were 1.1 million Democrats who voted in 2020 and chose to stay home in 2024. I think they would tell you that they're tired of Democrats sitting in the middle and negotiating away the things that are important to them. Our party used to have a supermajority in both chambers of Congress when we had big, bold, progressive ideas that changed lives for working class people. We were the party that created Social Security. We created Medicare and Medicaid, rural electrification. You have clean water because Democrats delivered that and Republicans opposed every one of those projects every step of the way because they said it was socialism. It's absolutely insane. Sam Rayburn used to say it best. You call it socialism, I call it applied Christianity. We have an obligation as a party to take on the establishment, to take on whatever systems that are broken, to make sure that the little guy at the bottom gets his fair shake. That's who we are as a party. That's how we're going to move forward, and that's how we're going to win.
All right. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Still ahead, ironing out the rules for the state's new education savings account program in time for the next school year.
We are not just a little mom and pop coming in. We are teaching, educating.
We'll take a look at the main point of contention. Plus, the buzz being created with the addition of another Republican in the Texas Agriculture Commissioner race. You're watching Lone Star Politics. In office since 2015, Texas Ag Commissioner Sid Miller is running for his fourth term. In his announcement, he said, in part, I am ready to tackle new challenges, seize new opportunities, and keep Texas leading the way in agriculture. The eighth-generation farmer and rancher currently faces two challengers. On the Democratic ticket, there's rancher Clayton Tucker. But first, Miller will have to defeat his Republican challenger, a former beef farmer who was once among Miller's top donors. So we have a hope to get Miller on our show. We plan to have him coming in. But first, this morning, we're talking with candidate Nate Sheets. Thank you so much for being with us.
Vince, thanks for having me.
All right, we know that you were once one of Sid Miller's biggest contributors and donors there. So, what changed?
You know, I just see there's such a need that we have here in Texas to really be able to focus on farmers and ranchers. I've been in agriculture for a long time, been a small producer all the way up to a large producer. Started with one beehive in my backyard. I think we've got 120,000 beehives this year. And so I understand not just the agriculture producing side, but I also understand the food side. And so farmers and ranchers in 1980 made 40 cents of every $1 of food. Today, 45 years later, they make 15 cents of every $1 of food. That's why in Texas we lost 68 farming and ranching families this week, last week, we'll lose them next week, and have since 2018 we've lost over 17,000 farming families in Texas.
Mm-hmm. So what made you come to this decision to want to do this and jump in the race?
Well, really, a good friend of mine, Rick Santorum, who ran for president, who also has endorsed me, really encouraged me to look at this. I was the CEO of Nature Nates until November of last year. And I spent 12 years in full-time Christian ministry. I worked for a Christian mission agency, and then I spent 12 years doing Nature Nates full-time. Mm-hmm. And so really kind of asking the Lord, where would you have me invest this next season of life? And Rick just said, you know, people in America are getting sick from the food that we eat. You cleaned up the honey industry by the testing and things that you did at Nature Nates. Why don't you go do that for the rest of America and Texas? And so came back, and I actually took Sid out to lunch and asked him what his plans were, and he said that he was considering running for a different office. And I said, man, great, I'd love to, you know, run for AG Commissioner. He said, I think you should do it. And so, you know, honestly, I just started talking with a lot of different people out there, and the more people I talked to, the more sense of urgency that I heard from, especially moms. Please go clean up the food. Please go clean up the food. And then also the school lunch program. You know, we are 44th. Last year, in 2024, we were 44th in the nation in nutritional value in the school lunch program. That's a tragedy. Mm-hmm. You know, what kids eat directly impacts their performance. And we keep having behavior issues and education issues. And, you know, I heard the governor at a lunch a couple weeks ago said, I want Texas to be #1 in education. My first thought and comment is, well, then we have to change the way that we approach feeding kids. Kids that are on SNAP program get 40%, 60% of their nutritional value from that school lunch program. And we have to do better. They deserve more. We deserve more. And we need it as a country. 78% of kids 18 to 25 are ineligible to serve in the military today because of their health. So it's a national security crisis. Mm-hmm. We also spend $4 trillion a year in America treating diseases of symptoms related to the food that we eat. So it's a fiscal security issue. And we're losing farming and ranching families, and 70% of all Americans have one chronic disease or more related to the food that we eat. So you can see how these two things, farming and ranching, families and production, and the quality of food, we can come together by giving farming and ranching families access to grow that 15 cents back towards 40 cents. Mm-hmm.
So do you think that there's been anywhere that Sid has missed the mark, and that you think that you can do it better than he can?
You know, I'm not going to plague the Texas Department of Agriculture with ethic issues. You know, there's been a lot of things that distract what's going on at Texas Department of Agriculture. And if the Lord allows me to be Ag Commissioner, we won't have any of those issues.
All right. Nate Sheets, thank you so much for being with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Up next, your political headlines, including a fast approaching Texas voter registration deadline and efforts to get the state's new education savings account program up and running. Work continues to finalize rules for the state's new education savings account. Which providers are considered a private school remains a point of contention. Acting Texas Comptroller Kelly Hancock and his office will oversee the first statewide school choice plan in Texas.
We're moving rapidly. I think, as a small business owner, I would equate it to moving at the pace of business, not the pace of government, and we kind of have to. There's not really an option there when it comes to the education savings account, having the program up and running for that 26-27 school year.
The program allows families to use $2,000 towards a homeschool and $10,000 for private schools that meet state-recognized accreditation. Take a look at these. These are the constitutional amendments that Texans will vote on this November 4th. Many of 17 measures are aimed at lowering taxes. These state-level measures will appear on ballots above local races. And it's important for you to note that if you are not yet registered to vote, The deadline to participate in the election is tomorrow, October 6th. Early voting for the November 4th election happens October 20th through the 31st. Dallas County has a new elections commissioner. Paul Adams comes to North Texas from Ohio, where he served 15 years as director of elections in Lorain County. Adams was sworn into office by Judge Clay Jenkins on Wednesday. He takes over for Hyder Garcia, who spent several years in the position, first in Tarrant County before moving to Dallas County. Well, that is all the time we have. I'm Vince Sims. Stay tuned for Meet the Press with Kristen Welker and the latest on the U.S. government shutdown. Thanks for joining us for Lone Star Politics.